Hey, hi Mavis. Awesome. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
Great. Yeah, you see me? Is everything? Yeah,
Yeah,
okay. Seems perfect. Yeah, okay.
same for you.
Yeah, yeah, fine.
Okay.
So, yeah, good to meet you. And yeah, I know a lot of my German followers are also fans of your channel. And I always hear, oh, well, I'm also watching Meredith Miller so in the USA. And so, yeah, it's an honor to make an interview with you. And maybe we can share some thoughts about toxic relationship, narcissistic relationships, and yeah, so, and get new stuff for viewers. Okay.
Awesome. Could you also introduce yourself for my
Yes.
followers who are going to watch this video so they
Great.
know who you are?
Yeah, so my name is Christian Hemschemeyer, very difficult German name, and I'm a YouTuber, couple therapist, psychotherapist in Germany, and yeah, specialized in toxic relationships and narcissism, borderline, all the stuff. And yeah, here in Germany, there's not so much going on regarding these view on relationships. And yeah, I've quite thriving channel here in Germany, and also a program for self-love and self-healing after toxic relationships. So, yeah.
Awesome.
And would you like to say something about you, your work, and
Sure.
yeah?
I'm Meredith Miller, and my channel on YouTube is Inner Integration, and I'm a holistic coach. I help people heal after relationships with psychopaths, narcissists, and other manipulative characters. And I do coaching sessions. I also have courses available online, and I just published a new book as well on the self-healing journey after narcissistic abuse.
Yeah, great, great. Yeah, and for my viewers, I will put a link to this video to your online courses and your also your book, and yeah, so that my viewers who speak also English could check out your work. Great.
Awesome. I'm also going to put a link to your channel and to your site below for any of my viewers who speak German, because I know I have some German speakers as well.
Yeah, great. So yeah, let's enter maybe the first question. What is your motivation to make this work? What brought you into this area?
Probably similar for a lot of people, that my own wounds from earlier in life essentially led me in this direction. And once I figured out what was going on and I was able to start healing myself, then I realized like this was the niche focus for my holistic healing and coaching work. And it just kind of came about that way. So kind of everything that happened was, I like to think of as like an immersion training for
Yeah,
the work that I do nowadays.
yeah, like the universe is getting you some tasks and some challenges and so on. Then
Right.
so and yeah, it's also something I thought sometimes that it's like a boot camp, no? So you get this woman and this woman or this man, and okay, I can learn this and this and so on. So like the
You had
universe.
very similar.
Yes, yeah, I was also in yeah, difficult toxic relationship, and they were so bold, these relationships, and so crazy that I really thought, okay, so I really should learn here something for my work, no? And I'm a couples therapist for 20 years, but so this there's a total shift in my work, no? So in former times I was more like communication and but now it's like you get new glasses and you see suddenly, well, there are relationships that are totally different. There's a totally different functioning of this relationship, and it's and couple therapy is as a normal couple therapy is even dangerous, no, for these couples, no,
Right.
because it makes the narcissist even more dangerous and more subtle, and so
Right.
and
Because it's like the typical rules of human engagement just don't
yeah.
apply to these relationships.
Yeah, yeah, that's really and yeah, and yeah, same here. So yeah, I worked with a lot of coaches in this area to really bring together knowledge for my clients, and I think like you try to what worked for me, put together in online courses, which is a totally cool new way of really teaching people, I think. This is really great about the internet. But yeah, I think in a way you really need these to experience this by yourselves to really understand and have empathy for your clients. No? It really seems to help a lot. No? Or what's your view on
Right.
this? Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, I think you have to live it in order to really understand it. I think most people looking from the outside in, as much as like maybe friends or family like
Yeah.
really wants to help a victim or a survivor of these kind of relationships, they just can't get it. No matter how much they love them, they might even be giving them bad advice because they just don't understand the nature of this kind of
Yes.
relationship and the healing process.
Yes. Try another time, and maybe you could love each one
Yes.
more or something like that. No?
Yeah.
This is really, yeah, that's really bad advice. It's really very dangerous. No? And you keep, and what on my experience was even with counselors here in Germany, if you have a counselor who doesn't get it, no, it's even more dangerous, no? Because then you know these like twin flames and all these stuff that's going on there, no? So you have a karmic relationship and you have to make it work and you have to try harder, and so it can really be very dangerous, no? Yeah.
Right.
Mm. Yeah, it's like when you like drug addiction, when you were drug addicted yourself, you really can be very good at helping other drug addicts, because you have these
Right.
this,
You get it.
this knowledge, you know how it feels
Yeah.
inside and why you keep getting back, and even if you know it's detrimental for you, no? Yeah. So what do you think? What brings people compulsively in this kind of toxic relationship, or what makes a relationship toxic? No? I know there's this idea of love addiction. What do you think about this? Do you think it's an addictive
So
pattern, or yeah?
the idea of a toxic relationship, the way I would define it is anything that is detrimental to your health, to your sanity, to your well-being. And I think, why do people compulsively keep getting into these relationships? Why did I? Because I observed this in my parents' dynamic growing up, and that was programmed into me. This is what a relationship is. This is what love is. This is what a marriage is. And so that idea became kind of hardwired into my nervous system. And then I just kept accepting that unconsciously in other people. Freud talked about the repetition compulsion, like you just keep drawing in a similar experience to help you get unstuck. So you could wake up and see the patterns. And I think that's what just keeps people in these sorts of relationships as adults. Every now and then I'll meet a client, it's very rare, but every now and then I'll meet a client who got into one of these relationships as an adult and did not grow up in a family like that.
Mm-hmm.
Usually in that situation, that person went through some major loss before they met like a psychopath. And that vulnerability, the psychopath just smelled like a shark can smell blood a mile away. And they smelled that vulnerability and attached right in. So normally though, what I see is that these come from childhood patterns, and usually we can't see those at first. Like usually we wake up to that adult relationship, we realize this is really unhealthy, this isn't okay, actually this is maybe more than one adult relationships, but we don't want to see the parental relationship yet, because that's the hardest one to look at. That usually comes later in stage 2 of the healing process.
Yeah, I think it's totally like my experience, and it's like it feels so familiar, no? To be with a narcissist, because maybe your father was a narcissist and or a love avoidant, and what I see, that's very often it's the parent of the. So when you're a woman, it's your father. When you're a man, it's your mother. It was really a difficult relationship, and your inner child is still trying to find the love of the parent, no? Who wasn't there, wasn't available for emotional connection, and it's like there's a child in you that's still trying to get this love, no? And you try to chase unavailable people as an adult, and all these it's like you try to repeat these patterns, so like your inner child is trying to re-engage you in similar situation with the hope of a different outcome, but it never happens. So, no? And I think this is so addictive, because when you get these love bombing, what's very often in this toxic relationship, then your inner child gets this hit, I think, no? And then so now it's happening. Now I finally get it, and then you get crushed again, because you get blocked or manipulated or whatever. And what I think that what's very typical in this relationship, it's this on-off pattern, and if it's really fast on-off pattern, I think it's addictive in itself. You have these super high times, and then suddenly it's crushes totally. You go against the wall, and you don't hear from the other one for weeks, or you get the silent treatment, and then suddenly everything is fine again. And I think this is this childhood pattern, and then these. I think you can even track it down to animal experiments that this is very addictive. This on-off pattern.
The intermittent reinforcement.
Exactly. It's
it creates the strongest bond.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's really crazy. And as for me, I think it's really kind of an addiction. And I think that it's really helps yourself understanding what's happening and why you can't get out. Because it's so addictive. And I have clients who were hard drug addicts and were love addicts, and they said, well, it's even harder with love addiction. That's really, this is really, and I think that's also some chemical stuff going on in your brain, because when you finally get out of these relationships, there seems to be really a total withdrawal of some inner hormones and all this biochemical stuff that's going on there.
Right. I think that has to do with the trauma bond too, the Stockholm syndrome. Like, it's the primal part of the brain that's concerned with survival. It's not the intellect. It's not that human rational part of the brain, like, which is why I think some people just don't understand. They're like, I know he's bad for me, or I know she's bad for me. Why can't I stay away? And it's that primal brain that kicks in that makes us sympathize with the abuser in order to survive, in order to be okay, even long after we leave that person. And I think that's the biggest addiction that we have to get over. And it's just so challenging because it's not like a rational, intellectual thing.
Yeah. Do you want to explain the term Stockholm Syndrome? Because maybe someone doesn't know the term.
So this came from a bank heist. I don't know when, maybe like 50 or more years ago, I think, in Stockholm. And there were some people who kept some people hostage during that bank heist. And so afterward, at least a few of the people who were held captive, they did interviews with the media, and they were defending the robbers who came in. I think even one of the women waited like 10 years for this guy to get out of jail, and she married him.
They married her? I heard this.
That's incredible. And a similar thing happens in abusive relationships, where you feel like this person has the control over your life, and they just might end you. And even if you don't feel like it in a physical way, but psychologically, like they're going to kill your sense of self, and then you get the intermittent reinforcement, you get isolated from other people's perspectives. So you only see the abuser's perspective. It's part of the gaslighting too. You believe in their reality. You don't get the outside perspective. And this person holds the power over your life, and you feel like there's no way out. And that's what ends up creating the Stockholm Syndrome, the trauma bonding.
Yeah, it seems to be when someone is really threatening your life and then suddenly gets nice and offers you a coffee or I don't know, says just nice things, that seems to be a primary reaction that you try to establish a bond with these with the one that actually exactly. So there seems to be really a lot of going on in these parts of your brain then. That's incredible. It's really okay. And what do you think about, so of course we talk a lot about narcissist, borderline. Do you think that people with maybe an unconscious strong codependency could also be toxic in relationships or manipulating, or I think it's always narcissists who do this manipulative stuff?
So there's a term called fleas, like narcissistic fleas. We talk about, because if you lie with a dog, you're going to get fleas, right? So if you spend a lot of time with a narcissist or manipulative character, you might pick up some of their behaviors, some of their perspective, that sort of thing. The good news is that can all be removed. Like when your dog gets fleas, you put a few drops of this medicine on his back, and the fleas jump off. They go find a new host. But you can get rid of these behaviors by looking within yourself. And, I think that's the positive prognosis for the codependent versus the narcissist. The narcissist is incapable of self-examination, of looking like, what's wrong with me? What can I fix about me? Whereas the codependent is always doing that. They're always looking at what's wrong with them. What can I do to fix this? So I think once you have the awareness of, when I do that, that's actually manipulative. And I actually learned that from mom, or I learned that from my ex. And I don't want to do that to people. That's not a good thing to do, so let me change that behavior. So I think that's what can happen. That's how we get rid of those fleas, but unfortunately the narcissist, once they're so ingrained in those behaviors, they don't change because they can't look at themselves. They can't take that self-responsibility that a codependent can take to uplift them out of that victim stage and into the survivor stage.
Yeah. So one aspect of these toxic people could be that they never get really in therapy, and if they get in therapy, it's even still a manipulative thing to pretend doing therapy and then say, well, I worked on myself, and just go on with their narcissistic stuff. So this is, I think, it's also something that's very dangerous. Because I had these clients who just sit there for 2 hours and then say, oh, I was in therapy really, and
wow.
It's crazy, It's and I think even especially in couples therapy, it's so dangerous because there's very often, I think at least a quarter of these couples that come to couples therapy are really toxic, narcissistic relationships, and there's one is sitting there and it's no empathy, and it's just sitting there and say, well, I did couples therapy, so how long is it? Okay, 90 minutes, fine. So I will do this. And I read really clients tell me that they were in another couples therapy and that their toxic partner said, well, see what's happening, and then the session started, and the narcissist, the man in this case, was really super charming to the female couple therapist, and so she was not getting it, and then they were out and went out, and then he said, see what happened? You want to have this a second time? I can do this. It's so incredible what's going on. Yeah, really.
It is. The most covert types will use that they'll play the thing, they'll say the right things. Oh, I need to work on myself. But all they're doing is finding out where the cracks in their mask are, so that they can get more sophisticated with their abuse. And I think that's by far the most dangerous thing that can come out of taking particularly a covert narcissist into therapy. I've heard some clients talk about that.
Yeah, I think these covert types, and even I think there's this term high-functioning borderlines, is very dangerous, So I think it's not in the DSM-4 or so, but there seems to be really people who don't cut their arms and all this stuff, but still working on a borderline level, And I think that's what also you said. It's very dangerous, and very difficult to spot these people. Yeah. So what I ask my clients first always is it hurting? Because in these toxic relationships, you get this incredible hurt inside, So it's really aching. Your body is aching, and you get these sometimes even these body symptoms. So not sleeping, not eating. I think you said in one of your videos, all this what ends to itis, some inflammations in your body, and then what I always ask is he there for you, or she there for you when you get ill, or when you have birthday or so? And very often I get the answer, no, I don't get birthday presents, or okay, when I'm ill, no, he's not there, so and then you get an idea, that's really one-sided relationship, and one is always making the work, and the other one is just, I don't know, experiencing the ride or whatever, and getting his supply, It's really...
Yeah, I think the really covert ones are even more confusing, because that person might show up and pretend to take care of you, but they're getting narcissistic supply. Oh, I'm taking good care of my daughter, my husband, or my wife. Oh, what a good husband. Oh, what a good wife. And people just don't get it. And that person's just like, I know something's wrong, but I can't put my finger on it.
Yeah, yeah, and to the outside, yeah, that makes you even more lonely when it's a very charming guy or a very charming woman, and all your friends say, "Whoa, what a nice
Yeah.
man, what a nice woman! So you are so lucky," and you're dying
Yep.
inside, and because it's really yeah, and I think you said something very important that there are, for these covert ones, maybe they make a lot of presents, but just to buy you, ne? To buy you,
Yeah.
to make you even more feel even more guilty and giving back even more, ne? So yeah,
Sometimes they like to hear thank you like 5 times. Like they give you a gift and then you say thank you. And then they remind you about that gift and then you
yeah.
say thank you again. And then they call you up and they ask you how you like the gift and then you say thank you again. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think with a lot of what I hear from a lot of clients that have I don't know, maybe narcissistic or borderline mother, and so later in life they need help and they ask for maybe money or a car or something like that, and these then of course they get it, but then the abuse starts again. I gave you my car and you did this and that and you're not thankful and now you have to do this and you have to look after me and so really it's difficult not to you seem to not get anything, no, from these people,
right.
no? Yeah, that's okay. So, and what do you think? So, all these narcissists or sometimes auch borderliners are acting quite love avoidant. Do you think all love avoidants are narcissists, or are there people who, yeah, maybe can't be inside a relationship really, but are not narcissists? Do you think it's the same, or is this a different
So I've
pattern?
also seen codependents who are love
Yes.
avoidant, like
Yeah.
my brother. He's a really loving, empathic, like
Yeah.
extremely empathic person, but he is so damaged and hurt from what happened in childhood
Yeah.
that emotional connection with the woman makes him want to run away. And the more intimate it gets, the more he wants to run away. Not in the way that a narcissist would do that,
Yeah.
though I do think there are some narcissistic abusers who are the love avoidant types for sure. But I do think there's also codependents on that side who are just so hurt from
Yes.
everything that happened that they're afraid. And I see that more in men than women for
Ah,
whatever
really?
reason. I see
Okay.
that it manifests more in the codependent men than women, and not always though. Like typically, you see the more the what do they call it? The other kind, the attachment, the needy sort
Yeah.
of attachment.
Love addicted, maybe, or whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think
What
that's
about you? What do you see in your practice?
what I lately really thought a lot of about if it's the same what you said. Maybe there's a more narcissistic borderline way of really not being in a relationship, so in love avoidance, and there's what I see there's a codependent way, same what you said, no? Codependent way. In Germany, we have the term passive love avoidant, what means so if you are codependent, being love avoidant, so and not actively love avoidant, but you seek these love avoidant people so that you don't have to live real intimacy
Wow.
because it's so scary. No? I think that's
Wow.
very interesting idea. No? So could be another reason you always chase unavailable people because when you are with someone who's really available, yeah, you have to face your fear, no? And
Right.
what's the reason? Yeah, what you said, you're damaged in the past or in other narcissistic relationships, and yeah, what I see very often is people who get out of these relationships are so when they first start working on themselves, they're very love avoidant. Sometimes they even say, "Oh, I don't want to be in a relationship anymore," or "I will be so careful in the future."
Right.
So yeah. Okay, then let's talk about what's your basic idea of this of the recovery from these relationship and these toxic relationship patterns. What do you think is most needed? Where do you have to work on yourself?
So I think that journey for every individual is kind of unique, though I
Mm-hmm.
also see patterns in the recovery process, just like the abuse has patterns, but everybody's experience is slightly unique. You know,
Yeah.
some people are with people, an abuser who avoids sex entirely and withdrawals, and other people are with a sex addict, that sort of thing. There can be nuances
Yes.
there,
Yes.
but the patterns are very similar. And the amazing thing you probably noticed too is that around the world, different cultures, different countries, different language, different race, different socioeconomic status, gay and straight, the patterns are so similar to this abuse. And I see the same thing in the recovery process where, that initial stage of recovery is about getting safety. It's about discovering, new things, like looking up what is a narcissist, what is narcissistic abuse, what's emotional abuse, that kind of education process. But most importantly, it's protecting yourself. It's setting up new boundaries. It's going no contact. It's starting to say no more often, like creating the very basic framework there. And then the second stage is where we do like the major self-care work, and that major transformation takes place. So for me, this path has been holistic. I've been really drawn to holistic therapies like acupuncture, acupressure, energy work, hypnosis, that kind of stuff. I think for other people, maybe they're more drawn to talk therapy, to 12-step programs. I also worked with psychedelic medicine. For me, that was just incredibly transforming. And nowadays, there's so much scientific research coming out from prestigious universities and MAPS as well, the Multidisciplinary Organization of Psychedelic Studies. They're working with PTSD, and they're working with MDMA-assisted psychotherapy, and they're finding like an 83% success rate. They're on track to legalize that therapy in the United States by 2021, which is not that far away. And I think there might be some major possibility there. I realize it's not for everyone. And I think everyone has like a different sort of like, who do we go to? Some people may go more to therapists or more to 12-step groups. Some people may go more to other holistic therapies or things like that. That part doesn't matter. The point is that you get what resonates with you, and that you start to implement that work for yourself, and you start to put in these basic self-care steps, reorienting your whole life perspective. Because if you grew up in a family, especially where this kind of abuse took place, you were programmed since a kid into this very negative reality paradigm. And I think that's actually the most damaging thing that gets left behind long after the narcissist is gone. That person might be dead, in fact. But if we're still living in that negativity reality paradigm, we can't get out of there. We're still living in that abuse. That's a huge part of the self-care piece in healing and reprogramming that self-talk. So for me, I see it as a holistic, as body, mind, and spirit. I think we have to work on all those levels in order to get really healthy. But I also recognize that each individual has an individual path in that healing process. What about you? How do you see the recovery process?
Well, what I focus very much on self-love, so I agree to, I think, what Ross Rosenberg is saying. Codependency is self-love deficit disorder. So it's really because of your childhood, it's an inability to really love yourself, and you try to look after other people first, and then you unconsciously carry these you live these patterns with narcissists because you're always helpful, and get trapped in these dynamics. So I focus a lot on self-love, but I agree the first step is getting out, so getting no contact and going to withdrawal. I think that's just surviving this withdrawal without entering a new relationship, which mostly is toxic again. So if you do it too soon. So what I always teach my clients is, so maybe you're at 30% self-love, and the other one is you try to get love from the outside, and then you go into this relationship, and then your inner buckets are even more empty once you get out, because it crashes your self-worth, and maybe you have only 10% self-love, and then you're even more vulnerable to the next narcissist, and you have to build up this self-love inside. And for me, it's accessing these thinking, the thought patterns you have. So what is ingrained in your thinking, like I'm not worthy of being loved, and that's the first thing for me. The second thing is inner child work. So I like really hypnosis in this fantasy journeys, that you get in a sort of trance and visit your inner child and see in what state is it, or what is needed, and really try to reparent your inner child, because when you always try to get it from the outside, which obviously doesn't work, so you never can fill inside fill your inside up with really self-love. So I always very often recommend a dating break of really 6 months or maybe longer, a year or whatever, so that you really learn to be alone and be comfortable with yourself, and I think that's very important for codependents. For codependents, usually a relationship is very important, so it's maybe the most important thing in the world, and I always advise people to make this part smaller, so there's maybe 1/5 is your health, 1/5 is your family, 1/5 is your work, 1/5 is your goals in life, and then there's a relationship, and it shouldn't be more than 20 to 25% of your life. Make it smaller, make it not so important, and and of course, whatever is needed. I think. What is new, I think it's also in your courses, is really these, you can say it's a kind of education about these manipulative tactics and narcissists use, so like love bombing or future faking or gaslighting, all this stuff. So, and then what I advise people is to really make a list of all your relationship, what were the basic patterns, because usually people think, oh, it was all different kinds of relationship, but once you have this framework, what is narcissistic behavior, so you see, oh, I was always narcissistic or nearly always in relationship, and then I call it like a domino effect. You say, oh, it was not one toxic relationship, it was maybe not all were equally toxic, but then you see, okay, I have these relationship patterns, and you go back to your childhood. I think that's very often a denial about your parents, so I think most part of the clients who say there's nothing wrong in my childhood, they just didn't see it yet, so when we talk about it more intensely, then okay, she wasn't there for me there, my mother, and she did this, and then they see, oh, okay, maybe my mother was a narcissist herself or a borderline, so this is the next, and then I go to the friends, so very often you also have not romantic friends, so where you're doing the work and they sucking you dry, so and if you're really unlucky, you have even children who are narcissistic. This is really can be very bad. Of course, this term is not meant for growing up children, but I think these patterns, I don't know if it's sometimes in the genes also, really, and they're really part of people who really, when they do this work, they can't stand these kind of relationships anymore, and then they are very alone maybe for quite a time, so because they think, my whole universe is really poisoned by these kind of relationship, and this is very challenging for the clients, I think.
That's one of the biggest fears that people have, is that loneliness. Like, if I step away from all the toxic people in my life, who's left? And it's so important, like you mentioned too, to lean into that loneliness, to get comfortable being alone, to learn to be alone and to be okay alone. That way you don't compromise yourself anymore for next person who's going to come in, the next manipulator. It's like really tempting, but you're comfortable with your loneliness and you're like, that's okay, I don't want that in my life anymore.
Yeah, I think that's also good that you mentioned this. A very important part is this forming of boundaries and deal breakers or non-negotiables, I like to call it, so that you really, because usually codependents don't, up to this point, didn't have really boundaries in their relationship, so, and to really learn, so what is a normal relationship, what do I expect in a relationship, and when you change these thought patterns that you are worthy of to be treated well, and you are worthy of real love, so then you can really learn to not accept this anymore, and I think that's a very good protection for further abusive relationships, that you always have your boundaries and your what is the deal breaker for you, and that you get the power of really stepping back once you are in a new relationship or in a dating phase, and you see, oh, red flags keep popping up, then that you have the power to really leave it, so, and this, I think, the universe is really testing you, so in later phases of recovery, It's so funny. I think it's not that you're suddenly out. No, you get you get tested. I
Right.
think something you experience too. No, so that's really
Totally. I think a really important perspective, one that I had to learn through this testing process and that I recommend
yeah.
for people is, to focus on long-term peace. Because
Okay.
if you focus on peace in the moment
Okay.
with boundaries and with the loneliness, what you're going to do is you're going to, want to have peace in the moment and be okay. So you're going to accept this toxic person in, or you're not going to set that boundary and say no because you don't want to upset the person, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you end up, you end up, creating this sort of peace in the moment, but sacrificing your long-term peace. Whereas if you reverse that perspective and you focus on the long-term peace and you say, okay, I'm going to be comfortable being uncomfortably lonely right now and say no to that toxic person so that I can invest in my long-term peace. And I'm going to say no to this. I'm going to set that boundary instead of people pleasing this person. I know they're going to get upset. I know they're not going to be happy, but that's what's going to invest in my long-term peace. I think that's a really important perspective
That's
to
a
keep
great
in
idea.
mind.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, this not rocking the boat or not. Yeah, that's. I think it's a very important point, even in the dating phase, né? When you get to know people, to really ask. So maybe you see your date drinking too much. Really ask. So have you problems with alcohol or what's going on? And you really pose these questions. Né? You really try to find out who the person is, né? Before you enter the next relationship that's detrimental for you. No? Yeah,
Right.
yeah, it's really. What would you say? How long does it take to really recover from these toxic relationships or these patterns?
I tend to hear 1 to 2 years, and I think that's probably about average. For me, it took a lot longer because I didn't realize what was
Mm.
happening for so long. I think from the moment that you hear the word narcissist or narcissistic abuse, it could take another 1 to 3 years. For me, it was 3 years and a half actually after I heard
Yeah,
that word. I couldn't even face it for the next 6 months after I heard that word. I just put it away. And then, had to go through more difficult experiences before I went back to looking at it. And even still, it took me 3 more years after that point to really, get to this point where I feel like I'm thriving in life. And I think that it's also important to recognize, I think sometimes, well, we all want it to happen like this. We all want it to be overnight and
yes,
to be done
yes.
really quick.
Mm.
And that doesn't happen, but to also be patient and gentle with yourself and recognize that some of these things are always going to be with you, and like you can get better and you can get a lot better and you can learn to thrive in your life in many ways. But I think that, especially if you grew up with this in childhood, or maybe for some people who were in a 30-year marriage, which is like growing up with this person, it was decades long. There's just always going to be these things that come up. You get into a new relationship and maybe you meet like a wonderful person. And every time they leave, you're panicking. Like, is that going to be the
Yes,
last they're coming? Are they going to not
yes,
talk to you? And then
yes,
nothing happened. But it's just like this automatic program that's afraid, I think. And so I think it's really important to be patient in
yes.
the process.
Yeah.
What about you? What have you seen in your practice with people in terms of the longevity of this recovery process?
I would even lean more to these 3 years, I think. So, of course, you make big steps in the beginning, you identify these patterns, but to really relax in yourself and to really get comfortable with yourself, your inner demons, I think, yeah, maybe 2 to 3 years, I would say, is really, of course, doesn't mean you have to, I see really clients really thriving just through these online courses or eventually a session here and there. So maybe it's not needed. You do 3 years of talk therapy. Actually, I had a lot of clients who were in psychoanalysis and all this stuff and said it didn't help them at all. So I think it's really a new kind of counseling or therapy that's really needed. So, and but what I see, that once you start to thrive, it's like the universe is rewarding you. What I see with a lot of clients, they suddenly earn more money or get new flat, or some other maybe non-romantic people are showing up in their life, and so it's really. It's like so the universe is really rewarding you to getting off of these bad paths. No? Do you see the same with your clients? I find this very.
I do. I've also found that in my life, like the more I'm standing in my integrity and
Yeah.
the more I speak my truth, it's like this magical thing happens and the universe wants to provide.
Yeah.
when those things are in place. When I'm not in my integrity and I'm not speaking my truth, then I don't get that same response from the universe.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really, so I had really clients who suddenly, so never had success in with their art maybe, and suddenly they got famous, and so they really, so this is really, so I think that's really, I don't know, maybe we before birth, I don't know, maybe we chose these paths to learn, and I really try to see these negative people, sometimes I say like negative coaches, really try to teach you self-love. So maybe they're really showing up because we gave this task to ourselves to really learn self-love in this life, and then maybe you need these people to really get on track to your recovery. So So, Meredith, you want to say more about your online courses? So what can people expect if they buy your courses? So what's the basic idea?
So I have 3 courses. It's basic, intermediate, and advanced. The basic one is totally free. When people go to innerintegration.com, they enter their name and email, they immediately get my free course, which is a 3-part video series that'll help them from the ground up. Then I have a 12-week sauna series, which is the intermediate one. And then I have the self-care mastery course, which is the advanced one. So that's all available on my website as well.
Great. Awesome. Yeah, I also have a free, I think it's an article about toxic relationship, what they get for free. And then in Germany, I have sort of a claim and call it reprogramming of your love chip. I call my course. So there's also a basic one, and then another course where you can really work for months on self-love and your thought patterns. And I also integrated some hypnosis thing, and then every now and then I make I call it a self-love challenge, where for 1 month the participants every day get a new task and can talk to this with the other students in this course, and it's also very interesting for the people. Where do people find your new book? So I learned
on
you
Amazon.
So just enter Meredith Miller.
Kindle and print.
Yeah.
Okay. It's called The Journey: A Roadmap to Self-Healing After Narcissistic Abuse.
Yeah. I just read it. I can recommend it very intensely. So it's awesome. I also try to write my book. I have 1/3 ready, but it takes so much time.
I know. Are your resources available only in German, or do you also have English resources available?
Yeah, I started with a course regarding love sickness. So that's my first course in English. So yes, so when you go to my website, there's also courses in English, a slider where you can find my English course.
Awesome.
And I plan to, English is not my native language, but I try to translate my courses into English also. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay, Meredith, good talking to you. It was really great fun. So then, so now you're living in Mexico, right? No, are you that
yes.
Not? Okay, so have a nice day in Mexico, and yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, and looking forward to
wishing you a happy New Year.
Yes, you too. Okay, bye, Meredith.
All right, big hug to you. Bye.